Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 4, Boyhood. When Godadhar was 7 years old, the simple, quiet life of the Chatterjee family was suddenly interrupted by a sad event fraught with great consequences to Godadhar. In the year 1843, Khudiram developed symptoms of indigestion, which soon turned into chronic dysentery. His strong body became emaciated, and in his 68th year, he had not vitality enough to check the growth of the disease. The autumn season arrived. Every year, Khudiram's nephew, Ramchand, celebrated with great pomp the Durga Puja festival at his home at Salampur. Khudiram usually attended. This year, apprehensive of the dark shadow looming in the future, he hesitated about going. But on second thoughts, he changed his mind and set out with his eldest son, Ramkumar. A few days after his arrival at Salampur, his illness took a serious turn, and on the fourth day of the celebration, he became unconscious. Ramchand was greatly concerned. Realizing that Khudiram's last moment had come, he called to him the name of Raghavir. At the mention of this holy name, Khudiram suddenly became conscious and asked to be helped up to a sitting posture on the bed. He then uttered the name of Raghavir thrice and passed away. Ramchand and his family were overpowered with grief at the death of Khudiram. His body was taken to the bank of the adjacent river, and the last rites were performed according to the usual custom. The sad tidings reached Kamarpukur and cast an unspeakable gloom over the Chatterjee family. To a Hindu wife, the death of her husband, who is her visible god on earth, is considered the greatest misfortune. Chandradevi was now virtually dead to the world, laying aside all the enjoyments of life, of which indeed she had very few. She concentrated her whole energy on prayer and meditation, and looked eagerly to the day when she would be united with her beloved in the other world. This event unnerved Ramkumar as well, upon whose shoulders now fell the entire responsibility of the family. He had to look after his widowed mother, educate the younger brothers, and manage the domestic affairs in keeping with the traditions of the family. The death of Khudiram brought a great change in the mind of Godadhar also. Every day, he felt the loss of his father more and more. The striking contrast between his father's character and that of other people began to dawn on him. His naturally thoughtful mind became graver, though to the observer he still retained his usual air of youthful merriment. No one observed that the boy began to frequent the mango grove or the cremation ground in the vicinity alone and pass long hours there absorbed in thought, nor that his attention was focused more than ever on Puranic recitals and the making of clay images of gods and goddesses. Besides, there was a marked change in Godadhar's behavior towards his mother. Finding that she desired great solace from his company, he spent some time every day in helping her in her household work or in the worship of Raghavir. He also became less exacting in his importunities, knowing she would be grieved if she could not supply his childish demands. He thought it his duty to lessen the burden of his mother's grief and to infuse in her melancholy life whatever joy and consolation he could. The village of Kamarpukur, as stated before, was situated on the road leading to Puri, and in those days when there were few railroads, this route was much frequented by pilgrims, wandering monks, and others mostly all on foot. The Laha family built a rest house for these wayfarers. Godadhar soon found a new source of pleasure in the company of the sadhus. He delighted in their stories of various saints and different places, and prayers and songs. He knew already of their unconventional life, their indifference to bodily pain or pleasure, their devotion and resignation to God, and their contentment with whatever food came to them. The boy was beginning to be conscious of the transitoriness of the world. Contact with the monks strengthened this feeling. He delighted in spending hour after hour with them, listening to their religious discussions, learning songs from them, joining in their prayers, and sometimes even partaking of their meals and assisting them by fetching water or collecting fuel. They took a great fancy to him. Chandradevi did not object. She rather rejoiced at this association of her son with the sadhus and thought that their benedictions would be beneficial. But one day she was startled when the boy came to her with his body smeared with ashes. He had torn his cloth into two and wrapped both pieces round his loins like kapina. "Look, mother," he said with a smile, "I have become a sadhu." The mother was anxious, for she had heard of pretended monks who in the guise of ascetics tempted boys and kidnapped them. She asked Gadadhar to shun their company. The boy, failing to convince his mother of the utter baselessness of her apprehensions, at last agreed to obey her and went to the sadhus to bid them farewell. They were surprised and pained to hear of the mother's fears and went to her house to assure her of the safety of her boy. Association with these itinerant monks and listening to their readings from the scriptures inclined the naturally emotional mind of the boy more and more to meditation. So we find him in his boyhood, long before he passed through the terrible asceticism in the Kali temple of Dakshineshwar, giving evidence of the transcendental nature of his mind, its difference from the ordinary one. The following incident furnishes an instance of his deep religious bent. The goddess Visalakshi, the presiding deity of Anur, a village close to Kamarpukur, was held in great veneration by the people of the neighboring villages as well, who often went there to redeem their vows on the fulfillment of their particular desires. She was reputed to be a particular patron of the poor and outcast, as well as of the cowherd boys. One day, a party of women, amongst them Prasanna, the daughter of Dharmadasla, who was noted for her piety and great devotion, was on its way to Anur to worship Visalakshi. Gadadhar insisted on accompanying them. Accordingly, he set out with them. As the party walked along, Gadadhar relieved the tedium of the journey with songs in praise of the goddess. Suddenly, he was overcome with religious emotion. His body became stiff and motionless, tears rolled down his cheeks, and he made no response to the women when they called aloud to him in their fright. Not being familiar with the trance state, they thought he must have had a sunstroke. Some splashed water on his face, others fanned him, but with no results. Finally, Prasanna in desperation called upon the goddess for help. The name of Visalakshi had been repeated only a few times when the boy showed signs of returning consciousness, and presently he was himself again, with no evidence of any harm having come to him. Gadadhar was now 9, and it was time to invest him with the holy thread. This is the first memorable occasion in the life of a Brahmin. He is supposed to enter a new life, a life of purity, sacrifice, truthfulness, and great restraint, and is therefore called a Dvija or twice-born. Besides observing great restrictions in food and other enjoyments, the scriptures enjoin on him the strictest discipline in all phases of life, and condign is the punishment for any breach. Every Brahmin boy looks forward to this sacred ceremony. Gadadhar was no exception. A curious incident happened in this connection. After the investiture with the holy thread, it is the general practice with the newly initiated to take his first bhiksha or alms from some relative or person of equal rank. But it so happened that Dani, the blacksmith woman of the village, had long ago prayed to Gadadhar to allow her the privilege of giving him the first bhiksha, and the boy, moved by her genuine love, had agreed. Dani waited with an expectant heart. After the ceremony was over, Gadadhar told of his promise to his brother Ramkumar. Objections were raised on the ground that it was contrary to the custom of the family, but Gadadhar insisted on keeping his promise. The family was forced to give way, and so it was from Dani that Gadadhar took his first alms. Reading this incident in the light of subsequent events, many ideas arise in the mind. First of all, it shows Gadadhar's great, undeviating love for truth. He had given his promise, and he was ready to keep it at whatever cost. At the same time, it does not explain why he gave a promise which might bring social stigma on his family. Could it have been Dani's sincere devotion that prompted him to do it? May it not be that, even at that tender age, Sri Ramakrishna's every act had its meaning, and that his unerring intuition empowered him to recognize religious sincerity and to prefer it to social regulations, which, necessary as they are under ordinary circumstances, must be set aside if the spirit of the law, instead of the letter, to be honored. So far, it was only the villagers who knew the great qualities of Gadadhar, although none had any idea of the great part that he was to play later. Shortly after the thread ceremony, An incident occurred, bringing him for the first time before them as a teacher. He was then about 10 years old. There was a great Shraddha ceremony in the house of Dharmadas Laha, to which a number of Brahmin scholars were invited. As generally happens on such occasions, the scholars were engaged in an animated debate over some subtle point. The argument lasted for hours. Their excited gestures and loud voices during the wordy warfare attracted a number of spectators, amongst whom was Gadadhar. While the other boys were chatting or imitating the gestures of the pundits, he was listening with rapt attention. Finally, the boy whispered something to a Brahmin, asking if that might not be the answer. When the others heard it, they accepted it at once as the only possible solution. Coming as it did from a boy of scarcely 10, they were amazed at such mental maturity in one so young. Similar incidents are by no means uncommon in the lives of great ones, such as Sri Krishna, Shankara, Sri Chaitanya, and others, who evidenced extraordinary powers at a very early age. It is said that before he was 8, the great Shankara had mastered the Hindu scriptures. At 16, he composed the masterpieces on Vedanta, which take the man of ordinary intelligence a whole lifetime to read and digest. Sri Chaitanya, too, showed astonishing intelligence and memory when he was quite a boy. All this shows that by their very constitution, they must have access to hidden reservoirs of knowledge and wisdom, not dreamed of by ordinary men and women. And in judging their actions, we must show a spirit of humility and rid our minds of all preconceived ideas. After his investiture with the sacred thread, Gadadhar was permitted to worship the family god Raghavir. This filled him with great joy. He was aware of his father's great devotion to him. So when he sat down to worship him, he thought of him not as a stone emblem, but as God incarnate, the creator, preserver, and destroyer of the world. The hours he passed in worship and meditation raised his mind to a very high level, where he often had remarkable visions. On a Shivaratri night, arrangements were made for a dramatic performance in the village at the house of Siddhanath Pine, the theme chosen being a chapter from the life of Shiva. It is customary on such occasions for the devotees of Shiva to fast the whole day and keep vigil by prayer, worship, and songs in his praise. For services are held in the 4 watches of the night. Young Gadadhar also fasted that day and resolved to pass the night at home in worshiping the Lord. The first watch was over when Gya Vishnu and some other friends came to him and said that his presence was needed at once at the house of Siddhanath Pine, because the man who was to play the principal part, the role of Shiva, had fallen ill at the 11th hour, and they must have a substitute, and Gadadhar had been selected. Gadadhar at first declined, saying he could not leave his worship, but his friends pointed out that therein playing the part, he would have to think constantly of the Lord Shiva, and that too was worship. So Gadadhar was prevailed upon to go and was taken to the green room. While his friend were dressing him for the role of Shiva, smearing his body with ashes, matting his locks, and hanging Rudraksh beads and other accessories of the costume on him, his mind soared far from the consciousness of the world. When the time came for him to appear, he went on the stage with slow and measured steps and supported by his friends. His countenance was grave, and as he stood before the spectators, he seemed the living impersonation of Shiva. The enthusiasm of the audience was unbounded. In the meantime, the boy had completely lost himself in the divine glory of Shiva. His mind in its transcendental flight was transported into a region of calmness and serenity, as immutable as the Lord Shiva himself. The different phases of the great glory of Mahadeva, the god of gods, were revealed to him. Calm, sweet, self-forgetful, and oblivious of the pains and pleasures of the world, the great god appeared before him as the ideal of serene contemplativeness, immersed in samadhi. There the boy stood, lost in the great sublimity of Shiva, dead to the surrounding world. The manager of the performance, with 1 or 2 elderly men of the village, approached him and found that he was unconscious. He would have been taken for dead, but for the stream of tears flowing from his eyes and the radiance of his countenance. The effect of this scene upon all pious hearts among the audience was tremendous. Finally, his friends became alarmed and tried to restore him to consciousness, but in vain. The performance had to stop. He was taken home in that condition and did not recover outward consciousness till the next morning. Such trances became rather frequent thereafter. While meditating or listening to a devotional song, his mind would be withdrawn from outside objects and remain long in a state of absorption. When questioned about this, the boy said that meditation on any deity brought the real form before his mind, and the emotions evoked thereby caused him to lose outward consciousness. His mother and relatives were at first much concerned at these trances, but the boy's unimpaired health and bodily vigor gradually set their minds at ease. Though he was often thus overpowered, there was no interference with his daily routine. He took great delight in all the religious ceremonies of the village, deriving equal pleasure from the worship of all forms of deity without distinction. This impartial love enabled him in the long run to realize that the same divinity was behind all images and religions. Those few fortunate souls of Kamarpukur who were able to discern the greatness of God-intoxicated actually worshipped him. One of these was Srinivas, whose family lived by making shell bracelets. The master often spoke highly of this man's great piety and spirituality. He loved God-intoxicated and took delight in his company, often holding animated discussions with him on the Bhagavata. One day, as he was making a garland for worships, God-intoxicated came. Srinivas at once brought some sweetmeats from the market and, concealing them in his cloth, conducted God-intoxicated to a secluded spot under a tree in the field. Looking about to be sure that he was not observed, he worshipped God-intoxicated, hanging the garland on him and feeding him with the sweets. With eyes bathed in tears and a voice choked with feeling, he said, "I have become old and feel my end approaching. I shall have not the good luck to see the many wonderful things that you will do in the world. I only pray that you will ever look with compassion upon this unworthy servant of yours." We have spoken of the association of God-intoxicated with the other boys of his village. They passed a great portion of the day together in play, often absenting themselves from school. Their favorite retreat was the mango orchard, which has been dedicated by Manik Raja to the use of the public. They assembled there under a big tree to partake of the fried rice they brought from home. God-intoxicated selected a number of young boys who could sing and formed a sort of dramatic company. The themes of their performances were episodes from the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, which they heard often at the amateur village plays, which God-intoxicated, owing to his retentive memory, could reproduce almost verbatim. He selected the part for every actor, himself taking the part of the hero, of course. God-intoxicated's favorite themes were the various incidents in the life of Sri Krishna, especially the Vrajalila, or the youthful sports of Sri Krishna with the cowherds and milkmaids of Vrindavana. The height of dramatic effect was reached when he sang the pastoral songs depicting the great exploits of Sri Krishna or the pangs of Sri Radha at her separation from her beloved lover, while the other boys acted as Subal, Sridham, and other companions of Krishna. Young God-intoxicated, with his fair complexion and flowing hair, a garland about his neck and a flute at his lips, would take the part of Sri Krishna, or, as Radhika, depict grief at separation from Krishna. God-intoxicated, overwhelmed with the emotion associated with these themes, would fall into frequent trances. At times the whole mango grove would re-echo with the Sankirtans which the boys sang in chorus. Soon the teacher learned that the boys absented themselves from school in order to spend their time in song and merrymaking. One day, he summoned them before him and asked them who was their ringleader. God-intoxicated was pointed out, and the teacher asked him to repeat what he did in the mango garden with his friends. Boldly the boys sang a song, which so charmed the teacher that he forgot to punish them. Of these boys, the most intimate friend of God-intoxicated was Gaya Vishnu. God-intoxicated never forgot to share the sweets or fruits presented by the village women with him. As he grew older, God-intoxicated's distaste for the routine work of the school increased, though he loved to read the epics, Puranas, and other sacred books. There he would find a response to the great spiritual fervor in his heart. Sometimes he read aloud the lives of Prahlad, Dhruva, or other great devotees to the villagers. The more his attention was turned in this direction, the more he neglected his studies. Because of his frequent trances, his eldest brother thought it wise to allow him freedom, so that he might not feel the strain of any sustained work. Meanwhile, the monotony in the life of the Chatterjee family was broken by various incidents, one of which at least greatly influenced the future career of Gadadhar. Rameshwar and Sarvamangala, who were now grown up, were married. The wife of Ramkumar was soon to be a mother, but this, instead of causing any joy, filled the family with apprehensions of coming danger. Her actions were very strange. She broke the traditional rule of the family of abstaining from food before the worship of Raghuveer. When taken to task by her husband or mother-in-law, she was resentful. In the year 1849, she gave birth to a male child, who was named Akshay, and expired soon after, thus fulfilling the prophecy of Ramkumar. From this time, they're set in an adverse tide in the pecuniary condition of the family. Rameshwar, though an expert in the Smriti and other subjects, could barely earn a decent living. Ramkumar's income was also unexpectedly diminished, and he was too old to find new ways of increasing it. He had scarcely recovered from the great shock of losing his dear wife, the loving companion of 30 years, when he was called upon to face financial difficulties. Forced into debt which he had no way of paying, he resolved to go elsewhere, to some place where he might turn his qualifications to a better account. Upon the advice of friends, he decided to go to Calcutta and open a toll at Kamarpukur in the central part of the city. The burden of the family now fell on Rameshwar. Young and inexperienced as he was, he tried to accommodate himself to his new situation. He had to look after an aged mother, a younger brother and his own wife, as well as the motherless boy of Ramkumar. Gadadhar's aversion for education filled him with great concern for his future, but he inherited Khudiram's precious trait of looking to God in everything and resting satisfied with what was ordained by the divine will. So though at times his spirits drooped, at others he forgot everything in the company of the pilgrims and ascetics in the rest house of the Laha family. He knew that God hammered so fiercely at his world, trampled and kneaded it like dough, cast it so often into the red hell heat of the furnace, because human nature was still a hard, crude and vile, or which would not otherwise be smelted and shaped. And somehow he managed to support the family. The death of Ramkumar's wife threw Chandradevi into a sorry predicament. When her daughter-in-law was the housewife, Chandradevi was to a great extent free from the concerns of the family and spent her time mostly in prayer. Now at the age of 58, she was hurled back into the world. Besides taking care of Akshay, she had to help in the cooking, the worship of Raghuveer, and other domestic affairs. In the grip of old age and infirmity, she must again pick up courage, leave her rosary aside, and give herself to the service of the family. I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.